Well, good morning, 420 Fred. What's up, Reefer Revolutionary? Revolutionary. You and me, baby. You and me, 420 Fred. We are waiting with bated breath. What's up? Good morning, everybody. It is Reefer Revolution live coverage of the historic Senate Banking Committee hearing. And that's going to be coming up short. We're just waiting for them to start. I've got it ready to rock. They are rolling. The image is there. They are sending the stream. It's just nobody there yet. So it is happening. The title of this hearing is Challenges for Cannabis and Banking Outside Perspectives. Coverage begins at 10 a.m. If you watch the show on Sunday, you know or heard that this is the very first Senate banking hearing with regards to cannabis. Hysterical. It's historical and historical. First up this morning, I believe, is, let's see here, Cory Gardner. As I read somewhere before, I think Cory Gardner is going to speak. Of course, the representative from, or senator from Colorado, who has the States Act, trying to move it through. And I did, here we go. Honorable Cory Gardner, the Honorable Jeff Merkley of Oregon. Two big proponents, one on the right, one on the left, of cannabis. And of course, Cory Gardner has gotten a verbal acceptance or positive reaction from 45 with regards to the States Act. Said he'd sign it, I think. It went through. But what they're going to be talking about, I think, mostly today is the SAFE Banking Act, which, of course, is all the hearings last week were about pot for profit and the businesses, and the banks are right there wanting their money. So they get their hearing. They get their hearing today. Very first Senate hearing on, and hear it under Mitch. No one thought this would happen. Nobody in the space really thought this was going to happen. I don't think. I'm going to spark up a bowl over this. Slurricane for the morning wake and bake. Look, I've got my, in honor of Merkley, Portland, Oregon. It's from a show called Here Now. Took place in Oregon. Been through Oregon, I think. Maybe not. Well, we're planning a trip to Oregon at some point. We have friends there now. Good friends, as well as new friends like Bingus and stuff. So guys, we are waiting for the United States Senate committee. Full committee. This is a full committee hearing. Supposed to start at 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's what this is, right? It's 3 hours. Am I early? No, here it is. They're here.
We'll now come to order. Before we get started, we have two witness panels this morning. Senator Brown and I will give our opening remarks first, and then we will hear from Senators Gardner and Merkley. Once the senators have finished their statements, we will proceed with our second panel of witnesses. Today, the committee will hear from witnesses about the challenges that state-sanctioned businesses in the cannabis industry have when attempting to access mainstream financial services. Under the Controlled Substance Act, marijuana, or cannabis, is currently considered a Schedule I drug. Being categorized as a Schedule I drug means that the possession, distribution, or sale of marijuana or other marijuana-derived products is illegal under federal law, and any proceeds from cannabis-related activities remain subject to U.S. anti-money laundering laws, such as the Money Laundering Control Act. In the last several years, many states have used ballot initiatives or referendums that have legalized marijuana in some form, whether for recreational or medical use. Currently, there are 11 states, plus the District of Columbia, where it is legal to buy and consume recreational marijuana and medical marijuana as well. And there are 22 states, plus D.C., that have approved medical marijuana, totaling 33 states in all that have some form of legal marijuana. Senators Gardner and Merkley have introduced bipartisan legislation that attempts to ease some of the difficulties resulting from marijuana's illegal federal status and more lenient state laws. I've spoken many times with Senator Gardner on this bill and appreciate the hard work that each senator has done on this legislation, and I look forward to hearing from each of you very soon. Our second panel of witnesses will highlight challenges that institutions face in banking different parts of the marijuana industry, how marijuana-related businesses operate, and the complications that they have faced in accessing financial services, and finally, how the SAFE Banking Act would work. We will also hear concerns over advocates pushing to legalize marijuana, the effects of SAFE Banking Act in light of marijuana continuing to be illegal under federal law, and health harms and addictions that marijuana can lead to. I look forward to learning more about the SAFE Banking Act and understanding how the safe harbor would work, what the compliance challenges regarding interstate commerce could be, and the challenges presented when banking legacy cash, specifically ensuring that the legacy cash complies with the FinCEN guidance. Having a conversation about whether banks should be able to provide banking services to entities engaged in federally illegal behavior, but behavior which is legal in some states, brings up an issue and a concern of mine that has been a big push, where we've seen a big push to choke off legal industries from the banking sector. I've said many times, and I will say it again, Operation Choke Point was deeply concerning to me because law-abiding businesses were targeted strictly for operating in an industry that some in the government disfavored. Under fear of retribution, many banks have stopped providing financial services to members of these lawful industries for no reason other than political pressure, which takes the guise of regulatory and enforcement scrutiny. Operation Choke Point was inappropriate, and Congress needs to pass legislation to prevent future Operation Choke Point initiatives. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senators Merkley and Gardner, welcome into the second panel. Also, over the past several years, voters and legislatures in nearly every state have to some degree legalized or decriminalized cannabis. In my state of Ohio, medical cannabis is legal. Dispensaries opened earlier this year. The legal cannabis industry is one of the fastest growing in the United States. It employs hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom are represented by unions like the United Food and Commercial Workers International Union. These Americans work hard to support themselves and their families just like workers in any other industry. They deserve the same rights and protections, yet in states like Ohio, these workers and businesses find it difficult to access the banking system. That puts them and the Americans they do business with at risk. No matter how you feel about marijuana itself, we have a duty to look out for the workers who work in this industry and for the communities they represent. Without access to the banking system, legal cannabis businesses are forced to operate in the shadows, dealing in large amounts of cash. It puts a robbery target on the backs of workers. It creates a safety hazard for communities. It can make it harder to monitor transactions and combat money laundering. Getting paid in cash means it's difficult to get a credit card, prove your income, to get a loan, or even keep your personal bank account. That can force workers to turn to shady outfits like payday lenders and check cashing services that charge high fees and interest rates, trap people in a cycle of debt, and make low-income people even poorer. Companies or workers that have found a bank willing to handle their unique business often pay high fees and are limited to only the most basic financial services. This problem doesn't just affect the cannabis industry, it affects people that you might not think of. Plumbers, welders, electricians, service retail locations and other facilities, lawn care and gardening companies like Scott's Miracle-Gro in Ohio sell materials and equipment. All these businesses want to serve their customers and support their workers, but they don't want to lose their long-standing banking relationships in the process. Community banks and credit unions in Ohio and other states want to serve the cannabis industries in these communities. In fact, when I recently met with members of the Community Bankers Association of Ohio and the Ohio Bankers League and the Ohio Credit Union League Earlier this year, nearly every hand shot up when I asked if this affected them. But we know serving this industry comes with legal and supervisory risks because of the tension, as the chairman said, between federal and state laws. It requires extra layers of due diligence, challenging and costly for banks and credit unions. Banks and credit unions play a key role in monitoring our financial system for fraud and money laundering and other illegal activities. It's critical that we maintain our robust anti-money laundering framework, and access to the banking system is essential to keep our communities safe and to ensure full participation in the economy. We can't continue to ignore this industry and the thousands of workers and communities it affects. We also know that today's hearing is just one piece of the conversation Congress must have on marijuana policy. People should not be thrown in jail or have their futures jeopardized by a criminal record over nonviolent marijuana offenses. Let me say that again. People should not be thrown in jail or have their futures jeopardized by a criminal record over nonviolent marijuana offenses. Everyone should have access to the medicine they need to care for themselves and their families. I'm looking forward to hearing the perspectives of all of our witnesses, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. As I mentioned previously, we have two witness panels today. On panel one, we will receive testimony from the Honorable Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado and the Honorable Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon. On panel two, we receive testimony from Ms. Rachel Pross, who is the Chief Risk Officer of MAPS Credit Union, Ms. Joanne Sherwood, President and CEO of Citywide Banks, Mr. Garth Van Meter, Vice President of Government Affairs of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, or SAM, and Mr. John Lord, CEO and owner of LivWell Enlightened Health. Senators Gardner and Merkley, you may proceed with your statements. Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Brown, as well, to everyone on the panel for the opportunity to speak before you today. This is a difficult hearing. Difficult topic, I know that, but we were sent here to deal with difficult topics, and I am grateful for the opportunity to talk about this today. It's an important step forward. First hearing we've had on this issue as the federal government wakes up to the reality that the cannabis issue is not going to go away, and we must have action. There's been a dramatic shift in Americans' views of cannabis in recent years. Polling shows that about 65% of Americans support legalization of marijuana. 93% of the American public support medical marijuana. In fact, majorities of both parties support legalization. In a time when all the talk is about how divided we are in a country, we are remarkably united on this issue. Given that support, it shouldn't be surprising that the vast majority of states have changed their laws. 47 states now allow some form of cannabis. I recognize that my good friends from the three that have not, Idaho, Nebraska, and South Dakota, on this committee. That represents more than 95% of our population living in a state with laws allowing some form of cannabis. 33 states have legalized medical marijuana. 11 allow regulated adult use. It's happening in the bluest of blue states, the reddest of red, and in Colorado, the purplest of purples. It's happening in traditionally progressive states like Oregon, Massachusetts, and California. It's happening in fiercely independent states like Colorado, Alaska, and Maine. It's happening in conservative states like North Dakota and Georgia. It's happening in Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania and Ohio. Last year alone, Michigan, Missouri, Oklahoma, Utah, and Vermont all adopted or expanded marijuana programs. In short, the states that are leading on this issue, it's the states that are leading on this issue, and the federal government has failed to respond. It has closed its eyes and plugged its ears and pretended and hoped that the issue will just go away, but it won't. The disconnect between federal and state marijuana laws has become, as the Attorney General has testified, both intolerable and untenable. The dramatically expanded cannabis industry presents real challenges for our nation. I've been a skeptic about cannabis legalization. It's no secret that I opposed the legalization in Colorado. I was concerned about the effects of legalization on Colorado's youth and public safety. I was leery of breaking with the federal government. I was uneasy about adding another intoxicant into our culture. And I did not and still do not want to encourage my own children to use marijuana. Several years into legalization in Colorado, I can say, though, that the sky has not fallen. There are challenges, to be sure. Colorado has seen an increase in transient populations. There are concerns about traffic safety and hospitalizations, and cannabis has been illegally trafficked into neighboring states. But according to a recent JAMA Pediatrics report, youth use is about 10% lower in legalized states. One strong theory as to why that's the case is that legal dispensaries both force out illegal sellers and enforce age limits. So youth actually have less access to marijuana. The data on crime are mixed. Marijuana offenses are down. Colorado has also experienced an increase in violent crime, but that's likely driven by an increase in transient populations moving to the state. At the same time, the state has brought in over $1 billion in tax revenue. Last year alone, the state received more than $266 million in marijuana taxes. Millions of those dollars are ending up in Colorado schools. In short, the sky is not falling in Colorado. Instead, what makes the current situation intolerable and untenable is the disconnect between federal and state law. For instance, every single state legal cannabis transaction in Colorado is federally illegal. That means the dollars involved are the proceeds of an unlawful transaction under the federal money laundering statutes. That means that all of the different parts of our economy that connect to any legitimate business, plumbers, electricians, lawyers, accountants, landlords, etc., risk becoming federal criminals for serving a client legal under Colorado law. That also means that the $1.5 billion industry a year in Colorado is nearly all cash. Banks will not accept industry money for fear of regulatory action or federal forfeiture. Keeping those dollars out of banks means we lose the ability to trace where the dollars go. It also means that it's harder to ensure that all taxes are being paid. It makes it easier for criminals in the illicit market to pose as legitimate. And it leaves hundreds of millions of dollars in cash in the state. For example, the State Department of Revenue has one location that accepts cash, just one location. So business owners in the western part of the state often have to drive 5 or more hours with tens of thousands of dollars in cash just to pay their taxes. The cash creates a genuine public safety problem. Stockpiles of cash make the industry a target for thieves. In 2016, a 24-year-old former Marine was tragically shot and killed while on duty as a security guard at a dispensary. And we are making it hard for these businesses to comply with the law. A few months ago, a partner at a major national law firm told me that the firm's bank accounts were going to be shut down because they counsel state legal cannabis clients. I've also heard from city officials in the town of Desert Hot Springs, California. For them, lack of banking means that when they take in $1 million bond for a cannabis business, it takes days to count the cash. It takes several employees off their normal work, and it requires extra security guards in their offices. All of this is just scratching the surface of the financial services problems caused by the federal-state disconnect. I haven't mentioned the problems with research or veterans access or the EPA refusing to certify pesticides for use on cannabis or the FDA's struggles to police advertising claims or the confusion created for law enforcement or any of the other myriad problems that contribute to this intolerable and untenable situation. Congress simply must act. Our failure to act seems to be grounded in two incorrect assumptions. The first is that we can continue prohibition. We can't. We are a government of the people, and the people have changed their views, so our laws must change. The second is that we can come to a national consensus for full-throated legalization in the near future. We can't. There are still too many unanswered questions, many states that have legitimate concerns. If those seeking reform insist on swinging for the fences, they will strike out and lose the chance for real improvement. I believe Senator Merkley recognizes this. I appreciate his efforts to provide real, concrete improvement for the financial services industry with the SAFE Banking Act, and I believe Senator Warren recognizes this. I appreciate her efforts to forge a compromise to allow the states to move at their own pace with the States Act. And I believe you, Mr. Chairman, you ranking member, Mr. Brown, my friends on this committee, will see through this hearing that we must act. Thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with all of you today.
Thank you, Senator Gardner. Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. We have a fundamental conflict regarding states' rights and federal rights. It was way back in 1996 that Oregon developed a medicinal marijuana program. So that's quite a long time ago. We're talking 23 years. During that period, we have seen that the nation has changed, and many states have exercised their state rights to address what they felt was in the best interest of their citizens. But there is a heavy hand of the federal government here, trying to make life as miserable as possible for citizens across our nation. So our basic argument is let's stand with states' rights. Let's stand with the judgment from across the nation that individuals are doing the legislators are doing the best they can for their people and not proceed to create a federal chaos that is good for money laundering, and it's good for organized crime, and it's good for robbery, and it's good for cheating on your taxes, and it's good for cheating on your payroll, but it's bad for citizens. Let's correct this problem in this fundamental relationship. I'm delighted that one of my constituents, Rachel Pross of MAPS Credit Union, is here to testify about the viewpoint from our state. But across the country, businesses operating legally under state laws are faced with banking and safety challenges. Oregon passed their ballot measure for the use of cannabis, a vote of the people, way back 23 years ago, and in 2014 passed another measure legalizing and regulating adult use cannabis. However, these cannabis businesses and other related companies that serve the industry, landlords, lawyers, security companies, others, have been operating in all cash without access to bank accounts. I have here 129 stories from Oregon and from across the nation that I'd like to submit for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
And I'd like to note that among these stories, one is regarding a certified hemp processing lab, hemp. Now, we chose as Congress federally to legalize hemp as an ordinary farm product in the last year's Farm Bill, but unfortunately, this provision that we have regarding cannabis has been extended in many cases to completely hamper the ability of the hemp agricultural industry, which is exploding across the country, to be able to operate with our normal financial services. And Andrew, an attorney in Portland, Oregon, had 2 bank accounts closed because of his providing legal services. Do we really want the situation where citizens operating under states' rights in this country, operating in the best interest of their citizens as judged by their states, are unable to access attorney services? That is not a provision acceptable under the vision of equal justice under the law. Forcing legal businesses to operate in all cash is dangerous for our communities. I saw this with my own eyes when I joined an Oregon businessman, Tyson Hayworth, on a trip to our state capital in Salem to pay his tax bill. He had his quarterly payment of $70,000 in a backpack. He turned it over on a table, and it just kind of spread out across the whole table, and some of it fell onto the floor, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of money to be carrying around in a backpack. We then drove down to the state capitol and had to go through 3 levels of security for him to be able to pay his taxes. As you approached the building, there were police cars and patrol members, and then they would tell you which floor to go to, but not which room, and then you had another set of security, and then you had another set of security in the room where you deposit it, because millions of dollars in cash were flowing in from all corners of the state. This is one of the most absurd things that I have ever witnessed, and there's a lot of costs that reverberate back through the industry that are just really unfair and unacceptable and dangerous. We're putting safety at risk when companies are conducting themselves legally under state-passed legislation, state rights. So many constituents have reached out to share their stories, and that's why we're delighted that you're holding this hearing, for a chance for us to present these stories to the committee for consideration. I appreciate the work of the Oregon Retailer of Cannabis Association, the National Cannabis Industry Association, and NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, for sharing and putting together these stories that I've submitted for the record. Across the country, more and more states are following the example established in the initial states more than 2 decades ago. Red states, blue states, purple states, whether it's allowing the cultivation of hemp and its derivatives such as CBD, which was legalized in the 2018 Farm Bill federally, or taxing and regulating medicinal and adult use cannabis. In my home state, state and local governments took in over $80 million in fiscal year 2018 in taxes. That's $80 million traveling down the roads and highways in duffel bags and backpacks. I've heard from dozens of people who are operating perfectly legal businesses who have been forced to deal entirely in cash or risk having business and personal bank accounts or lines of credit cut off. Todd Thies, owner and president of Red Barn Cannabis from my hometown of Myrtle Creek, Oregon, told my office that not only has he lost business accounts for his dispensaries, but his employees have lost. His employees have lost their personal bank accounts and credit cards. Spouses of employees have lost their personal bank accounts. Many employees are fearful that as a result of these changes, they will lose their credit rating and be unable to buy a house or perhaps even have their mortgages or loans canceled. So, to sum up, thank you for holding this hearing, a chance to present this conversation. There's nothing good about forcing the world to operate on cash. It is an invitation to money laundering. It is an invitation to organized crime. It is an invitation to robbery. It is an invitation to cheat on your taxes or cheat your employees. Let's fix this. Let's honor the states' rights vision of all of these states that have said this makes sense here in our location for our citizens. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for providing this forum for this conversation.
Thank you, Senators. We jointly appreciate the attention and work that both of you have put into this issue and your being here with us today. You may be excused so we can move to the second panel.
States' rights, always such a precarious issue. You could be all for it, and in some instances, you're not necessarily all for it. Certainly in this, instance, I mean, they brought up, what was that? I forget what he said. It was not card check's a union thing. Where other businesses can't get access to services, like gun businesses and stuff like that. And that's one issue. States' rights, always sort of a double-edged sword, if you will, because, slavery was a states' right thing. So.
Welcome to our second panel. We appreciate you being here with us to share your knowledge and insights on this issue. I've already introduced each of you, so we will proceed in the order that you were introduced. And Ms. Press, you may begin. I should say, I ask all of you to remember to pay attention to the 5-minute rule so that we can have opportunity for questions. Ms. Press.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Rachel Pross, Chief Risk Officer of MAPS Credit Union, a mid-sized financial cooperative in Salem, Oregon, with about $770 million in assets and 65,000 member owners. I'm testifying on behalf of CUNA, the Credit Union National Association. CUNA represents both state and federal credit unions and their 115 million members across America. In the last 5 years, we've seen firsthand the many challenges facing financial institutions and the cannabis sector. MAPS takes no position on cannabis legalization, but we acknowledge that Oregon voters have already spoken on the matter. While cannabis usage is legal in Oregon, it remains illegal in other states. Given that, it may be tempting to believe that the concerns raised by this hearing only affect cannabis businesses and the financial institutions operating in states where cannabis is legal. That belief, however, is wrong. Even financial institutions that choose not to bank the cannabis industry still risk unknowingly serving these businesses. Cannabis businesses don't operate in a vacuum, and indirect connections are hard to avoid. As a bipartisan group of senators noted in a 2016 letter to FinCEN, locking lawyers, landlords, plumbers, electricians, security companies, and the like out of the nation's banking and finance systems serves no one's interests. The United States benefits from a vastly interconnected economy. A company like Walmart, based in Arkansas, where recreational use is illegal, could and likely does sell paper or light bulbs to recreational businesses legally operating in California through its website or the 167 retail stores it operates in that state. The same is true for companies like Albertsons, a grocery store chain based in Idaho where cannabis use is illegal. Yet, Albertsons has 126 stores in its neighboring states of Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Nevada, states where cannabis use is legal in some form. These examples show the problem. Every time an employee of a cannabis business uses his or her paycheck to buy groceries, the local Arkansas or Idaho credit union depositing the proceeds from those sales is directly impacted by the dilemma before this committee today. Without a federal law providing explicit legal clearance for financial institutions to provide banking services to cannabis businesses, it's quite likely that many of those businesses will be forced to operate in the underground economy, and many mainstream businesses would end up with no access to the financial services sector. That increases the potential of lost tax revenue and crime. It also deprives law enforcement of vital information. Cannabis banking can be done safely and effectively, and MAPS Credit Union offers communities in Oregon a safe solution. After extensive research and risk analysis in 2014, our member-elected volunteer board of directors voted to serve cannabis businesses for two primary reasons. First, to serve the underserved, which speaks to our mission and philosophy as a not-for-profit financial cooperative. And second, to enhance community safety by removing cash from the streets. Statistics show that cash-only businesses increase the risk of crime. A 2015 analysis found that, in the absence of being banked, 1 in every 2 cannabis dispensaries were robbed or burglarized, with the average single theft ranging from $20,000 to $50,000. Compare that to MAPS. We are on track to remove over $860 million in cash from the sidewalks of Oregon's communities in just 3 years' time. That is millions of dollars that used to be carried around in duffel bags by legal business owners in our state, creating public safety concerns for the communities we live and work in. We've established a rigorous screening and compliance protocol and have invested considerably in the robust infrastructure required to appropriately monitor and maintain these accounts. Our compliance program is regularly reviewed by state and federal regulators. We also obtain an independent external audit of the program annually. Most importantly, the compliance framework MAPS uses to serve cannabis businesses is based on the U.S. Department of the Treasury's FinCEN guidance. In accordance with that guidance, MAPS files quarterly suspicious activity reports, or SARs, on every cannabis business account, prioritizing those records to identify any accounts we suspect could be engaged in illegal activity. Today, 91.5% of our SAR filings are related to cannabis businesses. In addition, MAPS files currency transaction reports on cash transactions exceeding $10,000 in a single business day. Because the cannabis industry is primarily cash-based, this type of data would not otherwise be available if financial institutions like MAPS were not transparently serving the industry. We firmly believe that banking this sector delivers a significant benefit to law enforcement because we are essentially providing a continuous flow of free, highly detailed information on cannabis-related monetary activity in the state. In conclusion, we need Congress to provide financial institutions that choose to serve state-sanctioned cannabis businesses with a safe harbor. For that reason, credit unions support the Bipartisan Safe Banking Act, and I thank you for this opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Ms. Pross. Ms. Sherwood.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee, I'm Joanne Sherwood, President and CEO of Citywide Banks, located in Denver, Colorado. I am also chair of the Colorado Bankers Association. I appreciate the opportunity to present the views of the American Bankers Association regarding the federal prohibition preventing banks from handling money related to cannabis businesses. ABA supports Senate Bill 1200, the Safe Banking Act, and we are grateful to you for your leadership in holding a hearing to discuss this urgent issue. While some lawmakers would prefer to avoid this subject, voters have made it clear that the issue is not going away, with 33 states already having approved cannabis use and as many as 7 more states with potential cannabis-related initiatives on the ballot for 2020. Despite the majority of states having adopted cannabis regimes of some kind, federal law prevents banks from banking cannabis businesses. For banks, that means any person or business that derives revenue from a cannabis firm, including real estate owners, security firms, utilities, vendors, employees of cannabis businesses, as well as investors, is violating federal law and consequently could be putting their own access to banking services at risk. As the legal state cannabis industry continues to grow, the indirect connections to cannabis revenues will also continue to expand. Without congressional action and clearer guidance from banking regulatory agencies, that entire portion of economic activity, which operates across all 50 states, may be marginalized from the banking system. Even in banks in states like Idaho and Nebraska, where cannabis has not been legalized for any purpose, still face significant compliance challenges that must be addressed. Cannabis businesses operating in states where it is legal rely on all kinds of suppliers and service providers to support their business operations. For example, the bank may have a customer that is in an anchor business, a law firm, a payroll company, whose business derives some measure of revenue from a cannabis-related business in a neighboring state. As a result, a bank may inadvertently serve businesses and individuals that have connections with and receive funds from legal state cannabis companies in a nearby state. That's true despite the bank's best efforts to identify and prevent cannabis-related funds of any kind from entering the bank. In addition to the unintended consequences for ancillary businesses, communities with legalized cannabis are also struggling to address significant challenges to public safety, regulatory, and tax compliance that go hand in hand with cash-reliant businesses. In Denver, cannabis businesses make up less than 1% of all local businesses, but have accounted for 10% of all reported business burglaries from 2012 to 2016. On the tax side, access to the banking system would increase the efficiency of tax collections and improve the financial transparency of the cannabis industry. Since many cannabis businesses do not have a bank account, they are forced to pay their taxes in cash at local IRS offices. Processing such paper-based returns costs the IRS nearly 17 times more compared to an e-file return, and sometimes requires local tax offices to invest in additional security measures because of the cash payments. Allowing cannabis-related businesses access to the regulated banking system would also provide improved federal and state oversight of their financial activities. Bank accounts are monitored in accordance with existing AML BSA requirements. This helps law enforcement to identify and address suspicious transactions, an opportunity that is not available in an all-cash environment. Despite the myriad benefits that would result from banking this fledgling industry, widespread and consistent financial services will not be possible until Congress removes the risk of Controlled Substances Act liability and directs the federal banking regulators to issue guidance to help banks understand what procedures are acceptable. The Bipartisan Safe Banking Act would help achieve those goals, and we urge the committee to advance this legislation as soon as possible. Thank you for your efforts to address this important issue. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sherwood. Mr. Van Meter.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Brown, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify before you today. My name is Garth Van Meter, and I am the Vice President of Government Affairs for Smart Approaches to Marijuana, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to a public health approach to addiction and recovery. SAM was founded by former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, current editor of The Atlantic David Frum, and former senior drug policy advisor to 3 administrations Kevin Sabet. SAM believes no one should be locked up or have the rest of their life ruined just because they got caught with a joint. But we also should not create a new addiction-for-profit industry in the model of big tobacco. The fundamental question before us today is whether we want to promote and increase drug use during an addiction crisis or discourage drug use and help people find recovery and healing. By skipping ahead to a technicality over banking rules, the marijuana industry is hoping to gain many of the benefits of federal legalization without a debate over the public health effects. But make no mistake, a policy change around banking would have massive public health ramifications. In the past year, 10 states rejected major pushes to commercialize recreational marijuana, including New York and New Jersey. The Safe Banking Act will allow the expansion of an industry pushing new, exponentially more powerful forms of marijuana before any of its health or other societal impacts are fully understood. Banks currently want to have it both ways. They say that they are not taking a position on legalization, but they want to profit from depositing federally illegal proceeds. If they want to benefit from the sales of high-potency pot candies and vapes that are marketed to young demographics through social media influencers, they should be consistent and argue to have those things legalized and advertised. But they're not doing that because they know that their public reputation would take a hit. We've repeatedly heard that this is about dealing with a cash problem. However, what they're not telling you is that many dispensaries already have cashless options, including credit and debit card payments. If you go to the website at the bottom of the first page of Appendix A in my testimony, bigpotexposed.com, you can see a video footage from dispensary after dispensary confirming they indeed accept cashless payments. I want to examine two scenarios that could result from the passage of the Safe Banking Act. The first is the best-case scenario, that only legitimate sellers participate. According to former Speaker John Boehner's marijuana investing seminar, there are hundreds of billions of dollars sitting on the sidelines waiting to invest. The Safe Banking Act could have been drafted to narrowly address point-of-sale transactions. Instead, the bill is written specifically to allow those hundreds of billions of dollars to invest. Does anyone think that public health is going to be the driving force? Already in Canada, the CEO of a major marijuana corporation was ousted for a single quarter of poor sales. And Altria, formerly Philip Morris, has made a multi-billion-dollar investment into the marijuana industry. It's also important that we not deal with this question in the abstract. In particular, I will refer you to the first page of Appendix A, where you can see a marijuana concentrate called Shatter from Acreage Holdings, which is former Speaker John Boehner's new gig. Notice the name of the marijuana strain, Thin Mint Girl Scout Cookies. Let that sink in for a second. And those are the responsible operators in the industry. I could show you plenty of examples from irresponsible operators that are much, much worse. So that's the best case scenario if everything goes according to plan. But there's a much darker possibility, and it doesn't require a stretch of the imagination because it is already happening. International cartels have infiltrated legalized states and have used the cover of legalization to conduct massive grow operations, often in upscale suburban neighborhoods. The Safe Banking Act provides a scalable new avenue for these cartels to infiltrate the banking system in a much more systematic way. In Appendix B, you will find a letter from former DEA administrators and drug czars who describe a threat that parallels the multi-billion-dollar black market peso exchange, and testimony from Colorado law enforcement that lays out an example of how this would work. I'd be happy to go into more detail of these threats during witness questions. There still is an opportunity for the other witnesses in the banking industry at this table to wash their hands of the marijuana industry and say, we want no part of this coming nightmare. But if they proceed, at least it will be with the full knowledge of what they are investing in. Preying on the vulnerable through the marketing of high-potency and kid-friendly products, and producing new cases of substance use disorder and serious mental illness. It took us over 100 years to reverse the public health impacts of the tobacco industry, who continually cast doubt on public health advocates with industry-funded bunk science. We have an opportunity today not to repeat those mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Meter. Mr. Lord.
Chairman Crepo, Ranking Member Brown, members of the committee, thank you for providing me the opportunity to share my perspective on the issue of banking in the cannabis industry. My name is John Lord, and I am owner and CEO of LivWell Enlightened Health, a vertically integrated cultivator, manufacturer, and retailer of cannabis products under the laws of Colorado. LivWell is one of the largest cannabis companies in Colorado, with more than 600 employees and approximately $100 million in annual revenue. We manage 15 retail stores in Colorado, with each averaging close to $20,000 a day in sales, and collectively serve 4,500 people per day. Yet because of the current status of the law, we are forced to operate an all-cash business. I'm here today representing not only LivWell, but the Cannabis Trade Federation, for which I am currently chair. CTF is a national coalition of cannabis-related businesses dedicated to professionalizing, diversifying, and unifying the cannabis business community. Before launching LivWell, I had a more traditional business career. I began as a dairy farmer in New Zealand and eventually moved into importation, manufacturing, and wholesaling child safety seats and baby products. As the company grew, I established operations in the US, became a citizen in 2007, and sold my company in 2008. I was looking for my next venture, and just as medical cannabis industry got off the ground in Colorado, and I decided to apply my manufacturing and compliance experience to this new field. In 2009, we began a small cultivation space and dispensary, acting in accordance with medical marijuana provisions of the Colorado Constitution. After the voters of Colorado legalized cannabis for all adults in 2012, our facilities became dual use in 2014. But our evolution as a company was not always smooth due to the dichotomy between state and federal laws. Banks and credit unions have been reluctant to serve cannabis businesses or have refused to do so altogether. Some banks were discouraged or prevented from doing so by their regulators. As a result, we have frequently struggled to obtain and maintain bank accounts. At one point, I rented out a former bank to use as a vault to store cash. Another time, I had no choice but to walk into the IRS in Denver with more than $3 million in cash in order to pay federal taxes. Imagine running a business with hundreds of employees and having to make all payments, including payroll, in cash. It is difficult, and frankly, it's dangerous. This is something thousands of state legal cannabis companies are struggling with every day. While a company now has a more stable banking relationship, we are still far too dependent on cash. Since credit card companies refuse to process cannabis transactions, customers are forced to bring cash into our stores. We must hold the cash until it's deposited into our accounts. These are significant public and employee safety risks that could be avoided if cannabis businesses had normal banking relationships. I note that the news about cannabis banking is not all bad, notwithstanding the fact that the Department of Justice rescinded several memoranda regarding cannabis enforcement in 2018. FinCEN has maintained its 2014 guidance to financial institutions serving the cannabis businesses. Of course, from a law enforcement perspective, this makes eminent sense, as it is always easier for law enforcement to detect illicit activity if proceeds are subject to the transparency of the regulated banking system. Due to the costs associated with complying with FinCEN guidance, banking services for cannabis businesses are not cheap. A company pays in excess of $3,000 per month just to have an account. The current situation is especially challenging for small businesses. While we are able to absorb the additional costs associated with cash management and exorbitant bank fees, many mum-and-pop shops are not. It should be noted that these small businesses are also being squeezed by Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code, which prevents cannabis companies from deducting standard business expenses when they calculate their taxes. In fact, LivWell's effective tax rate is currently 80%. If there is any hope of helping small businesses survive and thrive, we must fix the banking situation and amend 280E so that cannabis businesses are taxed like any other business. Thank you again for inviting me here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lord. I want to start out my questioning with Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood. The Safe Banking Act provides a safe harbor from federal banking regulators taking certain actions against depository institutions providing services to the marijuana industry. There are many different state laws on marijuana, as has been indicated by our witnesses today. The question that I have relates to how, under the Safe Banking Act, would a safe harbor work for a bank providing financial services to marijuana-related businesses when the banking is across state lines? When you're dealing with different laws in different jurisdictions, how does this safe harbor work?
Thank you, Senator. In the state of Oregon, MAPS Credit Union, we actually only serve the state of Oregon. As a credit union, we're limited to a geographic charter. So we actually are not dealing outside of the state lines of the state of Oregon.
All right. Ms. Sherwood?
We have the same situation, Chairman, so we're only local within the state of Colorado. We would not deal with outside entities.
Mr. Van Meter and Mr. Lord, are you aware of situations where there is banking across state lines, or would be if we were to engage in this legislation?
Currently, no, sir. There would be, of course, an excellent opportunity to do so should the regulations permit.
There are now a large number of dispensary chains that are multi-state operators. So I imagine that just by virtue of operating in multiple states, they would be transferring money between states.
All right, let me move on to another question. Mr. Van Meter, you raised a number of concerns about the abuse and impacts of the abuse of marijuana that could occur if we have, I guess what you're saying is an essentially unregulated system. So are you saying that the banking of legitimate marijuana should be prohibited, or are you saying that there should be some kind regulatory system put into place to assure that we don't have abusive, high-intensity products and inappropriate marketing to the vulnerable?
Yeah, I'm saying we should have that debate before we address the banking question. That to address banking and the institutional investors entering the banking system to invest in marijuana firms is premature before we've had a debate over whether or how to regulate the addictive potential, the abuse potential of today's high-potency marijuana.
Could you give me just a couple further, a little more explanation of the issue that you're talking about? You indicated, for example, the high-intensity products and the damage that this could and is, in some cases, having.
Yes, sir. So if you look at some of the examples that I provided in the appendix, you'll notice that it's the concentrates that are most heavily marketed through their social media accounts, and these products are tremendously high potency. When you're thinking, most people think about marijuana, they think about 1 to 3% Woodstock weed in terms of the potency of the amount of THC in it. Today's marijuana, the concentrates go up to 95%. And it's a very educational experience if you watch videos of people doing these on YouTube. The most common effect is that someone coughs until they vomit and then they pass out. It's very disturbing to watch. So these are tremendously damaging products. They've been shown through the few scientific studies that have been done on them to have very damaging effects on the brain. And these are the products that the marijuana industry is very much trying to get people to graduate to. There are all sorts of promotions to get people to try marijuana concentrates.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lord, and frankly, our credit union and banking representatives could respond to this as well. Is the 2014 FinCEN guidance helpful and effective, and would you support making the FinCEN guidance statutorily required for all financial institutions in this arena?
All federal guidance is welcome, and we look forward to being part of this regulation continuing to evolve.
All right. Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not only is the FinCEN guidance very helpful to MAPS Credit Union as we serve this industry, but it's vital. It provides the compliance framework, and it's frankly the rule book that we abide by in order to do this safely and effectively and transparently.
Ms. Sherwood?
I agree. In addition, I think it's critical that the banking regulators clearly come out with the guidance that we're to follow as organizations so that we have clear expectations of how to operate.
All right, thank you. Senator Brown?
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Lord, from my open statement, you might suggest that in this whole debate, I'm most interested in the workers that work for you and others, union and non-union companies, union and non-union workers. A couple of questions. I wanted to, when you first started your business, had to operate in all cash without a bank account. What safety risk did this pose to your workers?
Senator Brown, incredible safety risks involved in just that volume of cash. Currently, we actually have our employees through a company called Delt Services, which is not directly involved with banking, and then we lease those employees to our cannabis touching company in order to provide one layer of protection back to those employees. So today we actually can process, but we do it through a two-step process. Prior to that, just large amounts of cash is dangerous.
Is your operation, or the operation you just mentioned, union or non-union?
Non-union, sir.
Do you see I mentioned in my opening statement, the United Food and Commercial Workers are involved and organized in some parts of this industry. Do you see your industry as potentially an industry where a lot of the workers unionize?
At this stage, not so much. In order to protect our employees, we provide a 401k plan, full company paid healthcare, and above average wages. And it's been a very robust industry for employees, and we're very proud of our past.
Have there been efforts to organize a union at your operation?
Yes, there has been.
Okay. And you've opposed it?
I have not opposed it. Our employees to date have rejected.
You've not weighed in at all?
No, sir.
Management's not weighed in at all?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have an obligation, you and your industry, to hire people who have served time in prison for possession of marijuana?
We would look forward to that situation. Recently, Mayor Hancock of Denver has provided an expungement program for felonies, which would be very necessary because we cannot, under state regulation, employ a felon.
You cannot employ a felon, someone who has committed a crime, even after they've done their time under state law.
Yes, sir.
Have you, as your industry has lobbied state legislatures around the country, is that one of the things you're lobbying for, to get that law changed?
Definitely, sir.
You have affirmatively lobbied to get that changed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. How is, Ms. Pross, how's regulatory guidance, for example, from FinCEN enabled you to provide financial services to the cannabis industry?
Sure. The FinCEN guidance is a rule book that we follow in serving these businesses. It provides us clarity on when to file suspicious activity reports, with what frequency, and how to prioritize those suspicious activity reports to ensure that we're flagging activity that could be beneficial to law enforcement, activity that could indicate financial crime.
Great, thank you. Mr. Van Meter, I appreciated the chairman's questions about this. I want to touch in a related way, but a little more. I understand the health concerns you raise in your testimony. It's persuasive and convincing, I think, to a lot of people. Would it be better to regulate this industry and include it in the traditional financial system in order to address your concerns?
Senator, that has not been the evidence or the experience in states that have legalized so far. There's been a lot of cross-pollination between the regulators going to work for the industry and the industry going to become regulators. And so it's very much a circumstance where the fox is guarding the henhouse. I think it might be a different set of circumstances if marijuana were placed under the Tobacco Control Act with the same ability to restrict potency, to ban concentrates, to ban all of these kid-friendly edibles. But that has not happened in any legalized state so far. Every effort to put a restriction on potency has been defeated by the marijuana industry. They have actively lobbied against that.
We, of course, have never seen regulators go work for the industry or people from the industry come and work for the Trump administration either, so I can understand that you might possibly think that. Mr. Lohr, would you answer the same question I asked to Mr. Van Meter?
Yes. Could you please repeat the question, sir?
Talk through that. Would it be better to regulate the industry in a traditional to address the health concerns that I think Mr. Van Meter pretty persuasively discussed? Would it be better for the industry? Would it be better for to regulate the industry in the traditional financial services system?
We're looking forward to federal regulation. We believe at the moment we have robust state regulation, but those state regulations vary from state to state dramatically. And we have a lot of safeguards and put into those state regulations, but federal regulation is what we look forward to. So,
what's to stop this is my last question. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. What's to stop what's happened in financial services, what's happened in Wall Street, where Wall Street basically owns this institution and the regulators, certainly in the Trump administration? What's to stop the regulatory capture in marijuana the same way we've seen it in banking?
I believe that some of these regulations are yet to be fleshed out. I believe that we're asking to be regulated, and these are debates that need to happen with regard to the regulation. Here today, we're asking for the basics of banking, the ability to put our money in a bank, perhaps take out SBA loans, etc., which again will help social equity and minority equity in getting started in these businesses. Currently, unless you're of high net worth or have access to high net worth individuals, is the only way to finance these businesses. So this would help allow that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The topics of today's hearing are of particular importance to me, as New Jersey is in the midst of a large medical marijuana expansion. And I have concerns that cannabis and cannabis-related businesses will continue to find themselves shut out of the financial and insurance systems. For example, if an insurance company is required to offer coverage to a cannabis business under state law, the insurer faces a serious and fundamental conflict between state and federal laws. That's why yesterday I introduced the Claim Act with Senators Paul, Merkley, and Kramer to end the confusion and legal exposure that arises from the conflict between state and federal insurance laws. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chairman, since I think you're the acting chairman, introduce a letter of support from 8 insurance trades into the record.
Anything you want with me as acting chairman.
Then I'd like to ask unanimous consent to the Claim Act be brought. No. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pross and Ms. Sherwood, when a local business obtains a commercial loan from a financial institution, is it common practice for the borrower to be required to obtain certain types of insurance?
Yes, Senator, and it depends on what type of business and what type of loan. But fire and casualty, hazard, business continuity, environmental, all those are requirements, and we are unable to close the loan without those.
Is that your experience as well, Ms. Ross?
Yes, it is.
And what happens when they are unable to get insurance coverage?
We are technically supposed to force place, but if that's not available in the marketplace, we would have to call the loan and ask them to pay us off.
Mm-hmm.
So at MAPS, insurance is typically required on all commercial loans because of the loan collateral. So if the applicant couldn't obtain insurance, then the loan request would be denied. If it was a loan that had already been funded for a commercial entity, the borrowers would be considered in default if they were unable to secure insurance coverage.
So either you cannot get a loan because you cannot get the insurance, or if you have proceeded in some way and your business has morphed into this area and you need the insurance and can't provide it, you're in default.
Correct.
Correct.
So would you agree that providing legal clarity around the provision of insurance at the federal level would help banks and businesses in the legal cannabis industry?
I think that makes sense, yes.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lord, can you explain to the committee some of the issues you've run into in trying to obtain affordable insurance for your business and employees?
Yes, Senator. Affordable.
You have a great South Jersey accent, too, I must say.
Slightly further south, but thank you, sir. With regard to affordable insurance, I think that's the key word that we need to take out. We do have insurance. There's about 2 companies that we're aware of that are insuring, but just to give an example, officers and directors insurance, the maximum that we could get was $2 million in protection. That cost $100,000 a year per officer and had a deductible of $1 million. So effectively, we got $1 million insurance for $100,000 per officer. Mm-hmm. So extremely expensive insurance. With regard to regular business interruption insurance, things like that, the insurance is there, but again, incredibly low dollar values. So, nothing that's really going to help the business survive perhaps, some sort of business interruption, mm-hmm. And high rates.
So would a more stable and affordable insurance market help you reduce your costs, expand your business, and create more competition and more competitiveness than black market marijuana?
Most definitely, Senator.
Are you able to fully insure all the dispensaries and ancillary businesses in your group?
No, we're not. We struggle with this, periodically. And as I said, a lot of the volume of insurance that we can get, or the dollar value of the insurance, is not where it should be.
Mm-hmm. And let me finally go back to Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood. Legal marijuana businesses don't operate in a vacuum. They usually need to rent property from someone. They might also need a plumber, an electrician, or even an exterminator to successfully operate the business. These ancillary businesses, I think, are also caught up in the confusion around cannabis banking. Are ancillary businesses at risk of losing their bank account if they work with a legal cannabis business?
They are, Senator, and it depends to the degree with which they participate. We are unable to lend against any property that has a cannabis-related industry in it.
Is that your experience, Ms. Ross?
Yes, it is. We do offer ancillary services at MAPS Credit Union, but our experience with these businesses is that they've had tremendous difficulty accessing banking services.
So let me close by saying, so a small business would often have to choose between accepting a new client and losing their bank account, or losing the client and keeping their bank account.
That's true.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tester.
Thank you, Ranking Member Brown, and thank all the folks who testified today. So from your testimony, I want to direct this to Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood. From your testimony, Ms. Pross, your credit union does bank the industry?
That's correct.
And yours does not, right?
That is correct.
And so tell me, Ms. Pross, you talked about the transaction reports and suspicious activity reports. Is that what your regulator is requiring you to do to be able to bank them? Or tell me why you have a market advantage over the bank. I guess the question is, how are you doing this without the regulators coming in and shutting you down?
Sure. Every financial institution has to go through its own risk analysis, how much legal risk and reputation risk that they're willing to take to start a new product line. Sure. And at MAPS, our board of directors chose to take this risk.
And that's okay with the regulators?
It is okay with our regulators.
So that's good. Ms. Sherwood asked me, the question is why aren't you doing it?
The fundamental issue is this is illegal from a federal perspective.
And your regulator is a federal?
Yeah, and we are not willing to take the reputational risk or the exposure.
Okay. And CUNA is also federal too, though, right?
We are, at MAPS Credit Union, we are state regulated and federally insured by the NCUA.
I got you. Okay. All right. So the example that Senator Menendez gave about everybody that is associated with lending money or doing business with a cannabis institution is at risk of losing their bank account. So right?
That is correct. If we become aware that they are servicing the cannabis industry, we are required to do an in-depth investigation, determine what percentage of their income is derived.
Who would make that determination of awareness?
That would be our bank secrecy department, and then we will look into the ownership and the owners of the company to see if they are then related to cannabis businesses.
I got you. So, Ms. Sherwood, does the Safe Banking Act solve all the cannabis banking problems? And I'm not talking about it from a financial perspective. I'm talking about it from a regulatory perspective.
I think it's a start, but unless the banking regulators clearly define the expectations and operating procedures going forward, it will not solve anything.
Does the ABA or CUNA have any language that would help solve this problem that they could put forward in a bill form?
At this time, we do not, but working with the regulators, I'm sure we can come up with something.
CUNA strongly supports the Safe Banking Act, and we feel that the FinCEN guidance for banking marijuana-related businesses is adequate to follow in order to serve this industry.
Okay, let me ask you, not what this hearing was about, but hemp. Can you bank hemp, Ms. Sherwood?
Currently, no. Until the regulatory guidance comes out, we're unable to operate.
So none of the regulators have come out with any guidance on hemp?
No, sir.
How about you, Ms. Prost?
We are serving the hemp industry.
Yeah, same as the cannabis. It's interesting because, quite frankly, we've talked to the regulators, and they tell us that regulation clarity is due to come out since we passed the last Farm Bill and took it off the schedule. This is, I've just got one question because I'm just curious, Mr. Lord. How much do you pay out a year in security?
We used to have it actually several $100,000 a year would be the answer to that. We've brought it in-house recently. We deploy veterans largely for internal security. And, we have probably 20 good-paying jobs.
Are they armed security?
Up until recently, yes. But just recently, we have removed the arms.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I think this is an issue that if Congress can do anything about, we should do it. I think that, by the way, Mr. Van Meter, your testimony is spot on. I tend to fall in the same camp as Senator Gardner does on this, and that the people speak, and we are representatives of the people, so we should move forward. Not that I'm any big supporter of it, because I'm not, but nonetheless, we are representatives of the people. Thank you all very much.
Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We also, I do believe we need some clarity here, and I want to go back to the FinCEN regulations, which I know, Ms. Pross, you indicated that your credit union has tried to follow very closely the FinCEN guidance, and particularly around SAR filings. One of the things I've heard from financial institutions in my state is that there's some lack of clarity around the term marijuana-related businesses, and so that creates a level of uncertainty. Can you talk about some of the shortcomings in the FinCEN guidance, Ms. Pross?
Our experience with the FinCEN guidance has been positive. It's a definite, clear line and rule book for us to follow. We don't believe that it's very unambiguous. We actually.
So the notion, you feel there is clarity around.
We feel there is clarity.
Marijuana-related businesses.
Yes, we define marijuana-related businesses or cannabis businesses as plant-touching entities, and then there are ancillary businesses that are not touching the plant but are serving the cannabis industry.
Ms. Sherwood, how do you feel about the FinCEN guidance?
The crust of it is that it's still illegal. So regardless of the guidance, making it legal or making the SAFE Act valid would then guide us to get more regulations, more clear guidance from the banking regulators. So in the absence of clear delineation from the banking regulators, we don't feel it's sufficient.
Yeah, and that's why I think so many of us here think SAFE is the right step forward to give you all the guidance and protection that I think you need as this becomes more legal in more states. One of the things, Mr. Lord, I've heard concerns from both farmers and bankers is the difficulty in keeping the THC levels in check, particularly as we go over towards hemp. I understand crops can't exceed the 0.3% THC level. According to some of my bankers, they're literally trying to go into the fields and doing testing on their own, which seems a little crazy. So can you, as a grower, comment on that challenge of how you maintain appropriate THC levels on an ongoing basis, since during the growing process there seems to be some fluctuation?
Certainly. What I'm commenting on is slightly out of our lane. As a THC grower, we cannot, in Colorado, grow hemp. So they're a different animal. But with regard, I can speak to regarding hemp, the amount of sunshine or wet weather, things like that, actually affect, just as they do sugars perhaps in many other crops, affect THC levels.
And so consequently, depending on where you may be in the growing cycle, you could get a different reading, which seems a little strange. I mean, do you think that financial institutions should be able to rely on state licensing processes for the purposes of whether you meet or do not meet those THC levels?
Yes. The crops have to be tested pretty much immediately at certain points, and that handled on a state basis is quite necessary.
Well, one of the things that I want to associate with Ranking Member Brown's comments, I really think if this is a direction we're going to head, we need to make sure that we have good access for small businesses, particularly minority, women-owned small businesses. Some of those communities have been disproportionately hurt, and clearly the current rules within Section 280E of the IRS really makes it very difficult for folks without access to a large amount of capital to get a fair shot to get into this business. Can you speak a little bit how these IRS current rulings really inhibit and prohibit small business, particularly minority-owned small businesses, from getting access to this marketplace?
Yes, I completely agree with your comments. It makes it incredibly difficult without access to, as I said earlier, high net worth individuals, etc., because that's really the only access for capital. With regard to somebody starting off in this industry at the moment without access to bank loans or SBA loans or any sort of economic development area or anything like that, it is incredibly different. In fact, I think almost impossible for minorities or anybody actually coming from just even a very regular situation to get a toehold in this industry.
So I think if we're going to move forward in this area, I think we need to give the kind of legal clarity that I think the SAFE Act would provide, and look forward to working to make that happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I want to start with Ms. Pross, and I know in your testimony you talked about the risks related to operating a business solely with cash. I'd like you to flesh that out a little bit in terms of possible physical risk and the difficulty in complying with other federal laws, especially anti-money laundering and preventing criminal financing.
Thank you. Just to clarify, are you talking about the risks that the cannabis entities are facing with that much cash on hand, or the credit union?
Both.
Both. Okay. Thank you. So we have talked to numerous members who've opened accounts at MAPS who have described that they have been storing cash in shoeboxes, empty mattresses. There are unscrupulous third-party players involved in this who are selling cash vaulting type of services, and those are not true cash vaults. They are, in fact, storage units, just basic storage units full of cash that are earmarked for various businesses. It is not safe. We had a cannabis business that was robbed on a Sunday and opened an account with us the following week. So it's a major issue, a safety issue. At the credit union, we make sure that cash is not stored in our facilities. We don't want to put our staff at risk that way. And one of the things that we're most proud of is our collaboration with law enforcement. I've had numerous law enforcement officers comment that us banking this industry is providing them data that they would not otherwise get if the industry were unbanked. And I had one investigator in particular who said, after we had done it a few years, he said, the SAR filings that MAPS is doing is actually helping us see what above board cannabis-related monetary activity looks like, and it's actually helping us hone in on the bad guys. And he just was profusely thanking us for banking this industry and making his life as an investigator easier.
I think that's just a critical point, is that this lack of clarity between federal and state law is driving this industry into an element that it doesn't want to operate in, and it has to interact with some shady characters by necessity, because it's not permitted to bank properly. And I just encourage all the Republicans on the other side of this dais to acknowledge that this is a real issue. There's a real debate about the health benefits and risks around marijuana, and this is, interestingly, an issue that unites both proponents and opponents of legalization, because everybody supports research, and quite reasonably, people who are opposed to legalization and people who are in favor of legalization believe that the research will bear out their views. I have a bipartisan bill with Senators Grassley, Feinstein, and Alexander, and others to break down the obstacles to research on marijuana. And we've actually worked closely with Sam on developing this legislation. But I'm concerned about the lack of access to financial services. So Ms. Sherwood and Mr. Lord, has the lack of banking services undermined the ability for research institutions, universities, and hospitals to conduct research? And I'll start with Mr. Lord.
Thank you, Senator. And most definitely, that and having any form of federal regulation around cannabis has huge implications when it comes to research. FDA will not recognize any research, even if that was performed currently, because it's an illegal substance federally. And the same goes for many universities conducting research are unable to for fear of their federal funding being removed. So it puts official research in jeopardy.
Senator, could I add something to that quickly? So if the marijuana industry was concerned about research, then I don't think that they would be selling some of these extremely high potency.
Well, hang on. I'm concerned about research. So I'm going to allow you to answer the question, but I'm not going to allow you to take a pot shot at the people on this that you're testifying with. If you want to answer the question about the extent to which the lack of clarity in federal law prevents us from doing research, I'll allow it, but I'm not going to allow you to just give your stump speech.
Sure. No, that is a fair point, that there are barriers to research, and as you mentioned, Sam supports reducing those barriers and supports your efforts towards to that extent.
Thank you. Ms. Sherwood.
Senator, I was just made aware Friday of that very issue, where we do have Colorado universities who would really benefit from researching this industry and the effects of it. Because they are taking federal grants and federal subsidies, they are unable to go forward on those programs.
Thank you.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. And first of all, let me just say thank you to the chairman and ranking member for holding this hearing. I know this is something that many of us have asked for. So appreciate it. It's such an important issue, as we can see, and particularly for the state of Nevada. Let me just say this, as a former attorney general, I so appreciate, I think there were 38 AGs that signed a letter in support of the Safe Banking Act. This was an issue that was important for me as the Attorney General of the state of Nevada, and here's why. I get, and Mr. Van Meter, I agree with you. I think there's concerns about the concentration of the public safety health risks, but I also know the people of the state of Nevada voted a majority to go down this path, and I respect that. So as a former Attorney General, and in conjunction with my colleagues, I do think there is a concern because we do not have a financial system. These businesses are forced to operate on a cash basis. And this is what the AG said in their letter. The resulting gray market makes it more difficult to track revenues for taxation and regulatory compliance purposes, contributes to a public safety threat as cash-intensive businesses are often targets for criminal activity, and prevents proper tracking of billions in finances across the nation. I do think that we need to address this issue for those very reasons, and we can still study the health implications and address what you've talked about when it comes to the concentrations and how they're marketing some of the marijuana. But let me jump back to this idea from a public safety perspective. And Ms. Pross, in your testimony before the House, you highlighted that 1 in every 2 cannabis dispensaries were robbed or burglarized, with the average thief walking away with anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 in a single theft. Outside of burglary and theft, could you discuss what other risks are associated with an unbanked industry that in my state generated more than $600 million in revenue last year?
Sure. As a Bank Secrecy Act expert, my concerns is financial activity going outside of state lines, seeing money laundering, financial crime, the financing of revenue for cartels and gangs. So those are all concerns that we have, and having the money going through a legitimate, transparent financial institution relationship allows us to hone in on activity that could indicate financial crime that is promptly reported, and it also helps us ensure that the activity going through our credit union is above board.
Thank you. And we've been talking about not only the banking system, but the legitimate medical marijuana businesses, but we haven't talked about the ancillary businesses. And as you know, there are so many other companies that are doing business, legitimate businesses with these establishments, from the security companies, we have landlords, we have accountants, electricians, garden stores, and they're also affected by a lack of a financial system to engage in. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it is.
And when you talk about your work with FinCEN, and I so appreciate it because I work closely with FinCEN as well. In fact, my husband worked at FinCEN at one point in time. Talk about, I understand that you actually, under the FinCEN guidance, banks are required to file 3 separate types of suspicious activity reports for cannabis businesses. Is that true for any other small businesses, 3 types?
No, it's not. It's specific to cannabis businesses.
And can you address that? Why is that?
There are 3 types of SARs. The first is a marijuana limited, and that is just saying by nature of the federal status of cannabis, we would file a suspicious activity report because we are banking the proceeds of a federally illegal industry. Mm-hmm. So that has to be filed every 90 days, and technically it's 120 because you have an additional 30 days to file after that 90-day period. Then there's a marijuana priority, and that is if we read something in one of our quarterly investigations that there's something perhaps amiss, or if we see activity that we're unable to explain, we would file a marijuana priority, and that raises a red flag for FinCEN to take a closer look at this business. And finally, if we determine that we need to close an account, either for behavior that indicates financial crime or for non-compliance with our compliance program, we would file a marijuana termination SAR, and that notifies FinCEN something is wrong with this business and we are closing this account for a reason.
And you are, for the first time, giving law enforcement the data they need to go after the bad actors. Isn't that correct?
That's correct, and we have received so much praise from law enforcement officers we've interacted with.
And then, and let me open this up to both Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood. According to a state of Nevada audit last year, there's around $500,000 in tax revenue was lost due to discrepancies between seed sale tracking and tax returns filed with the State Department of Taxation. Does the current FinCEN guidance allow financial institutions to provide information to state tax agencies when performing audits? Do you know?
That's a great question. I'd like to look into that and get back to you in writing on that specific issue.
Okay.
I agree. I can't answer that, but we can get back to you.
Thank you. I think that is a concern as part of this process. If we are to open up the door to financial institutions, we need to be tracking also for purposes that we've just heard today. Where's the money going? Is there lost money? How are we tracking this to make sure these are legitimate businesses? I know my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Crapo, and also Ranking Member Brown for this committee hearing, and thanks all of you for being here. You know, there is no doubt that we have a serious problem with a cash-only marijuana business, and one that deserves federal attention. And it's clear to me that having listened to this testimony and having spoken with banks and credit unions in Minnesota, that the status quo is just simply not workable with 47 states with some form of legal marijuana use. However, as we consider this legislation and any legislation to protect businesses and banks from criminal penalties, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member, I think that we need to realize that as we're looking at penalties, criminal penalties for involvement of businesses with marijuana, we can't forget the thousands of individuals who have spent time behind bars for their involvement with marijuana. And communities of color, particularly African American men, have paid a disproportionate price for generations of aggressive enforcement of marijuana laws. Now, we've made some headway here with the Bipartisan First Step Act. Just, I think, on Friday, 3,100 people were released thanks to that act. But we all know that there is so much more that we need to do here. So I think that it would be wrong for Congress to act to protect business interests without also considering what we need to do to erase the unjust suffering caused by our criminal justice policies. So I'm glad to see this committee consider this bill, and I believe that the Senate needs to consider it. I think the Senate also has a real responsibility to consider the civil rights implications of this new era of cannabis policy and our constitutional commitment to ensuring equal justice for all. Now, on this particular bill and the issues that we have here, I'd like to return to a question that Senator Tester touched on, which is the implications of legalized hemp production. Many farmers in Minnesota are looking at this. They're telling me that it is difficult to get loans. In some cases, it's very difficult to access payment processing for hemp. For Ms. Pross and Ms. Sherwood, what should we be doing to improve this situation?
Really, at this point, we're waiting for the regulators to issue their guidance, and that's the sole item that's holding us back from going forward.
compared to cannabis, we have the FinCEN guidance, which provides such a clear framework. And with hemp, there isn't as clear a framework for guidance. We are serving the hemp industry under Oregon's regulatory authority, but it's complex for sure.
So it's simply waiting for the federal guidance that we need to make this workable.
Correct.
Yeah. Let me ask another question. In Minnesota, we have legalized medical marijuana, yet I hear all the time from banks and credit unions that they are struggling to try to figure out what portion of money that is flowing through their institutions might have come in one way or another from some business related to cannabis. So could you just talk a little bit about how you see that issue, what is the best way we have right now for assessing that, and how might we fix that?
Sure, that is a complex issue, and it speaks to what I talked about in my testimony about the interconnectedness of our economy. It's impossible to draw a clear line between what is cannabis related and what is natural commerce that has nothing to do with cannabis. And I used Walmart as an example today because not only does Walmart accept money from employees of cannabis businesses in states where it's legal, but Walmart very likely sells basic business supplies to legal cannabis entities via its website or stores in other states where cannabis is legal. And it would just be impractical for us not to cash the paychecks of Walmart employees. It's the largest employer in 21 states. Mm-hmm. So it's a messy issue. It's complicated, and it's not just about cannabis businesses. This extends to every state.
Right. And is there a way of resolving this under the current financial regulatory framework, do you think?
I think the Safe Banking Act is an important step. I think that is the answer.
I think it's a start. I think we need to get greater clarity, which certainly the ABA is prepared to assist on, and get a greater framework to go forward.
Great.
Senator, could I add something briefly on that? So I think there's a distinction, as Ms. Sherwood mentioned before, between somebody who is incidental to the marijuana industry and somebody who's directly involved with it. In the case of some ancillary businesses, the reason why they're worried is because they're directly manufacturing and selling hydroponics and grow lights equipment to marijuana growers.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That concludes all of our senators. However, I want to ask a couple of follow-up questions. I should indicate we've got a hearing with the FBI director on leaks at the FBI that a number of our colleagues are at, and as well as a judiciary. Well, that was a judiciary hearing. The Finance Committee's got another big, and we've got a lot of members on the Finance Committee, so I doubt that they will make it back. I do expect you'll get a number of questions from them following the hearing, and I ask you to respond to those questions as quickly as you can. I wanted to take a few moments to pursue just a couple of issues. I think a case has been made pretty strongly here about the need to get the banking industry issues relating to cannabis resolved. At the same time, I think a pretty strong case has been made both that legacy cash poses a real problem in terms of providing an access point for cartels and for other illegal anti-money laundering activities, as well as the ongoing operations. But I think legacy cash creates a special problem. To all of you, and you can give brief answers to this, but is that correct? Is legacy cash basically a different issue here, or a more difficult issue? Mr. Van Meter?
Senator, so in Appendix B of my testimony, I submitted a letter from former DEA administrators and drug czars that outlines the ongoing threat, and then there was also a letter or a testimony from a Colorado law enforcement officer talking about the mechanism by which organized crime or cartel could abuse the Safe Banking Act and the banking system. And essentially, it boils down to the fact that it's very difficult to tell. This is always going to be a very cash-intensive business because the state seed-to-sale tracking systems track customer data, and then those companies turn around and sell that back to the marijuana industry. There's always going to be a proportion of the clientele that doesn't want to be tracked, and so is always going to pay in cash. And so it becomes very difficult to tell if somebody is dropping off a backpack of cash at a bank where that money originated, and there are lots of opportunities for abuse.
Mr. Lord?
Senator Crapo, in response, when I began in this business, almost 10 years ago, every last dollar was tracked by state regulators. Short of a colonoscopy, it was very, very intense where my money came from. And I think I had to supply, it was either 5 or 7 years of financial records prior to entering this business. So, all money that entered this business from Colorado cannabis manufacturers has been thoroughly vetted. And right now, our bankers, of which we do have basically a depository, so to speak, within the bank, conduct stress tests upon our business very, very frequently. And we have also audited books by a top 10 national accounting firm. So it's thorough.
Ms. Pross or Ms. Sherwood, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Part of our ongoing due diligence and opening due diligence on cannabis-related accounts involves tying financial statements, which are very frequently audited. These are very professional businesses with CPAs and attorneys, and we are comparing financial statements to the financial activity we see going through the account. We're also comparing that information to data that we are getting from the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to ensure that everything makes sense. And if something doesn't make sense, that is being promptly reported to the authorities. So we believe that this can be addressed, and it can be addressed in a very careful and diligent way.
I agree. As long as there's a clear guidance on how to handle legacy cash, it should be manageable.
All right, and this is a question, actually, I'd like each of you to respond to this. I think Mr. Van Meter has raised some significant questions, both with regard to the cash transactions and the banking transactions, but also with regard to, I guess I would say, the substantive regulation of product. For example, it's already been referenced, the high-intensity concentrates, the marketing tools and techniques, the targeting of children, and so forth. Do the states that have legalized marijuana, either medical use or medical and recreational use, do the states regulate those types of access and concentration and product content issues?
Senator, yes, they do, and very, very thoroughly. The maximum portion, regardless of potency, there are portion limits. There are maximum sales limits that we can sell a customer or a patient. We are tested product to parts per billion in purity, etc. The testing is extremely rigorous. It's in a state-tracked system in Colorado where every gram is tracked seed to sale. And Colorado has been used, because of the length of time that we have been in the market, as a template in other states. And so extremely thorough.
Senator, I wanted to point out, so again in the appendix to my testimony, there's a picture of some marijuana gummies. And these are considered not kid-friendly. So they're brightly colored, they're sugar-coated, they are in the shape of pot leaves, and that's why they're considered not kid-friendly, because kids are apparently, under the Colorado regulations, only attracted to gummies that are in the shape of cartoon characters or animals or people, but not vegetables or pot leaves or geometric shapes. That's the logic as to how those products are legal. But I don't know about you, but any of my kids would quickly pick up these products, and that's why poison control calls are through the roof in all legalized states, but particularly Colorado and Washington State, where the data is being tracked.
So I guess a question I have for you, Mr. Van Meter, excuse me, are you arguing for a tougher federal regulatory system of content and access, Or are you arguing that there simply should continue to be a nationwide ban on all marijuana products?
We think that legalization in America equals commercialization, and there isn't really a way to stop that. So from that standpoint, I think there is a benefit to keeping marijuana federally illegal. At the state level, we think that there are important regulations that should be put in place on potency, on product forms, as a start.
All right. Ms. Sherwood and Ms. Prost, do you have an opinion on this issue?
I'm not qualified to answer on the state restrictions. The reality is the voters have spoken. It's already in the system. We need to find a way to bank this.
Ms. Prost?
The state of Oregon regulates the cannabis industry in Oregon through the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, and I understand that this issue, it's much bigger than just banking. There are certainly valid concerns being brought to this committee hearing today, but the Safe Banking Act is narrowly targeted. It's a narrowly targeted protection for financial institutions to serve an $8.3 billion industry that is already in place today. It's narrowly targeted, and I think it's time for a bipartisan fix to this issue on the banking issue.
All right, thank you. I do have many more questions. We'll probably submit some to you myself. Again, I appreciate all of you coming today. This is a very important and complex issue that we need to get right. And your information that you've already provided in your testimony is very helpful in that regard. And as I indicated, you'll probably be asked to submit some further advice and insight to us as you respond to the Senator's questions. That does conclude the questioning for today's hearing. For the Senators who wish to submit questions for the record, those questions are due to the committee by Tuesday, July 30th, and again, we ask that you as the witnesses, if you receive questions, respond as quickly as possible. With that, this hearing is concluded.
The hearing is concluded. What do we got? 2 hours? 8:43. And Sam, the big negative Nelly there today, always in the house. Sam always joining in for the fun, trying to spread the propaganda and nonsense. Well, you know. What do you think? You think kids will like a cannabis leaf sheep gummy covered in sugar? Listen, sugar's not the best medicine for you anyway. But, you know, seniors need chocolates. You know, in the dementia world, people living with dementia, where we are finding more and more evidence and interviews in the documentary, and more to come. It's that Santa Rosa and the whole Emerald Triangle area, but Santa Rosa in particular, seems to be a real hotbed of medical cannabis use with seniors. I guess it's to be expected, but we've been educated so much in the last year, and just within the last couple of months, with what's going on up in that area, Santa Rosa, Sevastopol area, and using cannabis in these long-term care facilities that aren't federally funded anyway, with great results. And Bingus, welcome Bingus. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks everybody. Small Tubes, Curious, Cannabis Connoisseur, Duckfoot, CCCD to his friends in the chat. What's going on? Thanks for coming in. Gypsy Lady Lee, I just saw you jumped in there. Hello. Let's see who else came in. Happy Guy is here. Awesome. Some people jumping in I did not see come in. I want to make sure I say good morning to everybody. A little wake and bake with the U.S. Senate and the hysterical committee meeting, almost 2 hours. Making history in the Senate. But they got to get to that FBI leaker hearing. So they're going to move on to more important things. Jocelyn Russell. Hello, Jocelyn. Thanks for jumping in today over in the chat. We're talking about hemp. We're talking about growing. We're talking about Cannabis Sativa. Oh, deleting messages. You all right, buddy? It's all cool. It's all good. What's going on? Hey, Cannabis Sativa, welcome. Welcome. Everything's cool. We're all good. Everybody gets a wrench, you notice. Everybody's got a wrench. I'm following Bingus's lead. Last night we had, it's like, this is, you guys are family, and just like, Bingus and everybody who joins in those live streams. So everybody gets a wrench until they get it taken away. And if you're brand new, unless you're brand new, if you've been here more than once and we recognize you, you get a wrench. If you want a wrench, ask for a wrench if I haven't given it to you. If you don't want a wrench, I'll take the wrench away from you. That's fine too. But apparently, I did say hi. I do not want to hurt your feelings. I am sorry, Gypsy Lady Lee. I literally just saw your chat come in as I was scrolling through. So hello. Let me give you a wrench. There you go. Gypsy Lady Lee gets a wrench because I just saw you. And Happy Guy, I'll find you and give you one too. But I guess, if folks want to share links, that's really where it comes down to. If people want to share information, we are about education and information about cannabis and medicinal cannabis and blah, blah, blah. So, please share, feel free to share your links and get people, information. Please don't sell anything in the chat. No links to selling unregulated cannabis. That kind of stuff gets us shut down. So, I do not want to hurt your feelings. We literally just saw you. Thank you for jumping in, everybody. Pilgore420J, I think you were new, and you're out there in the garden, maybe. I don't know, but thanks for jumping in, everybody, guys. We got folks over on Facebook, too, and D-Live, Dab of Cannabis, everybody over on Feel the Burn. I'm broadcasting over there today just to expose myself to you. What are we thinking, guys? That was as historic as we thought it was going to be. Pretty much same old story from Sam. I'm going to spark up here. What are you smoking? I'm going to load another bowl. Oh, I better get some. Ooh, almost clanked it. Got some, we're talking about our high CBD strain. I need to get better light on my weed. Better light on the weed. There we go. What's up here? This is some Harlequin Tsunami, 1-to-1. Very balanced, very nice. And then we've got some. This is Slurricane. We're talking about the names. Sam freaking out about the names. I'm pretty sure if Acreage Holdings has a Thin Mint, a Girl Scout Cookies Thin Mint product, that they are in violation of copyright, as that has been found at a number of instances in the cannabis space. So it's a flavor. It's a smell. But I know one comment I made was that, we have the fastest growing demographic of cannabis consumer right now is seniors, and like up 250%. We're coming out of the closet, guys. Coming back out of the closet, getting interested. They want education. They want to know about things. They want to know about CBD. They want to know about CBD for sure. And they want to know about cannabis in general in the states where you can get it. And, does a senior really want to go in and ask for some green crack or some Alaskan thunderfuck or, what are some of the crazier strain names? Blue Dream is kind of mellow, but Charlotte's Web, Harlequin Tsunami. Eventually it's going to be Chemovars. So I think maybe a different naming protocol than from, that's always been, thing is cannabis has always been marketed pretty much to 20-something guys, that was the demographic, right? Forever. At least the one they said, who smokes cannabis? Young guys. I didn't smoke cannabis when I was young. I did cocaine, but I didn't smoke cannabis. Exit drug. I also don't use the neurotoxin alcohol anymore. This nonsense about, oh my God, they're concentrating the cannabis. Now, I don't do 6-gram dabs, but some idiot's going to do a 6-gram dab on YouTube and puke, and then that's going to be the story. I'm sure there's going to be, Michael Pollan put this out into the universe. I'm sure somebody out there is going to abuse or have some incident with this decriminalization of psychedelics, like what's going on in Berkeley, which is fucking amazing. but everywhere, Denver, California, Oregon. So there's going to be some stupid YouTube video and everybody's going to latch onto it. But, you're not going to, I don't do big dabs. I did my first dab on 420 last year. And we go to the dab bar every time we go to San Francisco. We go to Urban Farm, and we hang out at the dab bar with our good friends up there at Bram Toker. Bram, I call him Bram Toker, the San Francisco Cannabis Club. He's always there. And we hang out and do some dabs. And boy, they're powerful. They're like shots. But half an hour later, you're good. Not like, you start doing shots of alcohol. 2 hours later, you're in a DUI. You're crashed on the side of the road. You're, don't smoke and drive. Don't drive when you're impaired. Let's put it that way. And guess who knows when they're impaired? People who do dabs and smoke a lot of weed. Now, are there idiots? Yes. There's idiots in everything. There's idiots that eat sugar. There's idiots. I see idiots. 70% of this goddamn country are idiots. You see how big they are? I'm 70. I'm not making that number up, but look at all the fat fuckers. Oh, sorry. Bad me. But seriously, I mean, you see a family of kids in 7-Eleven and the parents and all these kids, and they're just loading them up on the sugar, loading them up on the stuff. It's like, oh, well, look at you and look at your kids. Okay, you're obviously sending them off in the right direction. Hope they don't get a hold of any cannabis. Might be bad for them. So it's all a big fazzool, as they say. And Sam has changed its rhythm of its tune. Same tune, it's a different rhythm. I guess, maybe not a greatest analogy, but we talked about it on Sunday about their, somebody from Sam had an opinion piece in the Hill about the hearings, the non-science-based hearings up on about cannabis. It's all about pot for profit. So what they've done is they've shifted their message from, they're still kind of hanging on to we need more, looks into it, it's dangerous, but basically now they're focusing on the same thing we're focused on, which is corporate cannabis. And now their tune is, do you want big cannabis like big tobacco? Well, guess who does? Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is all in on hemp. Boehner may be all in on cannabis, and he may run into some problems in Florida with their vertical integration with acreage, because I kind of heard the Florida Supreme Court said vertical integration is unconstitutional. So that's going to be interesting to see how that develops. But I digress. Boehner's into all in on cannabis, but Mitch is in on hemp, very much in on hemp, and hemp replacing tobacco in Kentucky. And if hemp can't get loans, that's going to change things. And it's going to have to change things for the whole plant. It's going to have to change things for the entire cannabis sativa family. And because guess what? They can't figure out the difference. Like the law enforcement go, can't tell by looking at it. And, you've got this good sticky, icky situation. You got this good sticky, icky medicinal hemp, which has all the terpenes, full spectrum. And boy, you're right. You let that grow too long, your THC goes over the limit and you're screwed. Don't test from the top, test from the bottom. It's an art. It's an art, but it's good medicine. It's great medicine. And then apparently you can take out all the THC. And provide a full spectrum chemovar without THC in it. Seems legit to me, but it's not. It's not in banking. It's not according to the FDA. It's not according to hemp may be legal, but guess what? It's not. They still can't get loans. They still can't do banking. They still can't, advertise. We can't. It's got to change. It's all going to change. And Mitch is going to make a change in the Senate, apparently. This is the crapo. How often do you see anything like this out of crapo? Come on. And nobody thought it was going to go anywhere in the Senate. And now, breaking news, guys. I don't know if you got I dropped it into chat. Breaking news this morning. You can follow DC420LA over on Twitter. And that will, that's where I break the news I find, mostly on Marijuana Moment. But this was somewhere else. Those guys do amazing work. But here, I'll bring it up on the on the screen. This is from CNBC. The news that the House Judiciary Committee Chairman Nadler has introduced, along with presidential candidate Kamala Harris, bill decriminalizing pot and expunging marijuana convictions. From CNBC. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler and Democratic presidential hopeful Senator Kamala Harris are introducing a bill to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level. The bill also includes social and criminal justice reforms. And it is, let me bring up the reaction from Normal. Somebody commented this story. I didn't notice this. Who was it? A viewer today. It was Piper for Fun. I think he might have been watching it earlier. This stock footage. This is he says, Piper for Fun says, that stock photo was a crime against joints everywhere. If you notice, don't you put a big nug in your joint when you roll it? I use a big nug at the end as like a filter. Don't you do that? Here, look like you're rolling a joint. Here, just put this in there. This is cute. This is good. This looks good. It's hilarious. Didn't notice that. But Nadler, Harris introduced bill decriminalizing expunging marijuana convictions. Bill also, okay, I read that. Never, this is the reaction from Normal. Never in American history has the chair of the House Judiciary Committee introduced a bill to end federal marijuana criminalization. Today, that was changed with the actions of Representative Nadler and his introduction of the Marijuana Opportunity, Reinvestment, and Expungement Act, the MORE Act. Marijuana Opportunity, Reinvestment, and Expungement Act. So now we have the States Act, the Safe Banking Act, the MORE Act, and what I call the Trump Act, or at least it should be called the Trump Act. It doesn't have an acronym, I think, but it's the ending federal marijuana prohibition act that Tulsi Gabbard introduced in the House. But I think it should be called. I think any one of these. All they have to do in the Senate. Here's what they do. They like naming these bills. Now we have the states more safe bills in the Senate. Is this psychological? I don't know. But we have the States Act, we have the Safe Banking Act, and now we have the MORE Act in the House and the Senate. So we have the States More Safe Acts coming out of the Senate with regards to cannabis. And I think they should combine them all, and they should find one that just deschedules it, leaves the states on their own, states' rights, leave the states on their own and decriminalize it federally, deschedule it, and call it the Total Repeal of Unjust Marijuana Prohibition Act, the Trump Act. Success in the making. You see, this is the strategy. Listen, and I got to tell you, SAM, the organization that is in every one of these committee meetings, talking their talk, where everybody gets their talking points from SAM. This is the head of SAM used to work for Obama. Okay. This is Obama's guy. This is an Obama era institution that is still behind. Obama did nothing. Could have done a lot. Did nothing. It's going to be really fascinating if Trump somehow 45 ends up descheduling or legalizing cannabis on a federal level. It's going to get him reelected. I'll tell you that. Would. But, I don't know. What do you think? It's just nobody thought the Senate was going to do anything. And, here we are. And I am convinced it's all about hemp. If hemp can't get loans, and you see it in Texas, there's a story that'll be in the Chronicle this week, in Texas, getting money for hemp. There was a story last week, in the Afterburn, you can see on the channel Sunday, about a California hemp company. And I don't know. These guys, I don't know that there's laws, regulations in California or anywhere for industrial hemp that makes them make sure it's feminized, or, use only feminized seeds, because I don't think they care. Especially the fiber kind. There's different types of hemp now, thanks to prohibition and It's just, creativeness. I think Jocelyn made that interesting observation. Prohibition led to distillation of alcohol into its, harshest forms. And it's kind of like a parallel with cannabis. If you could just smoke flower and everything was cool, who knows how far it would have gone with this. But that's where the medicine is. That's where the research is going on in Israel. The real amazing research is going on is looking at the different cannabinoids, pulling them apart, identifying them, and identifying which ones work with which. So you can put a chemovar, you can grow a chemovar, cultivar with the chemovar that kills prostate cancer. You can grow a cultivar with the chemovar that kills breast cancer. And then you can make an oil out of that, a full spectrum oil out of that plant, and use the whole medicine. Because that's what they're finding in this autism study going on in Israel right now is they change strains. Same ratio, strains were different. So it was the microcannabinoids, the minor cannabinoids that were, or terpenes or some other phytochemical that's going on that is making the medicine work better. So, it's a double-edged sword, just like states' rights. So, thank you guys for joining this morning. Let's see what you guys are saying, if anything. So Israel is way ahead. They do plant tissue cultures with autoflower, so everything stays identical. Yes, and that's there are some companies, there are some brands, some group that are doing it here in California as well. I know of one in particular that is definitely working on making a duplicatable strain. That's where this medicine is going, where this plant medicine is going. Let's see. Oh, we got to make some mushroom talk. Oh, curious cannabis connoisseur Duckfoot. It's going off in the chat. John says Trump was elected. There are plenty of idiots in America. True story. True story. Plenty of people hurting in America too. Trump, as really is the case, Trump is a symptom of 30 years of neoliberal, neocon collusion. You want to talk about collusion? It's corporate collusion with politicians. That's it. And really, if you read Listen Liberal, that basically tells the story of how, why Donald Trump is president of the United States. And they want to go back there again. So, I think it's anything goes. Anything goes in this environment, right? Oh, I hate to miss you all Sunday. We missed you too, Gypsy Lady Lee. We love seeing you there I hope everything is cool. Everything was all right on Sunday. We missed you. Hopefully see you next Sunday. Love going live midweek, guys. Love the new viewers. Love the viewers that missed us on Sunday that can come on and check us out. Chela is slogging away. Actually, she's enjoying her job this week. She's back in the game, working on a TV show, and she's actually enjoying her crew and doing it. So it's good. But we have super exciting things happening, guys. I don't want to talk about. Not all of them are in place, so I can't really talk about them all. But the documentary is really coming along, and we don't want to hold the information back that we're starting to get because it's amazing and too important. Because with no end in sight, cannabis helps dementia, and people need to know that. So we're going to start publishing the interviews. Maybe first for the patrons, for the patrons, give them a little thank you for being a patron of an OG Revolutionary, OG 420 Revolutionary over on Patreon, Reefer Revolution, if you're so inclined. We do this for the love of the information and education. So we appreciate any support and all of your support over there for the patrons, as well as Steam Chat. I always forget that name. Stream Chat? Streambot. I don't know what it's. But you can do that too. But really, just share the show, share the information. We had a great couple of great shows the last week. Great information, amazing news stories. We have fun in the afterburn. We kind of got our MST 420 hot boxing theater for all of the media and for the senators. Just throws our little angle on things, making fun of it in the chat. We got folks watching on DLive today, Facebook jumping in, Twitch. Not many folks watch us over on Twitch. I don't know. I thought we'd have a bigger audience on Twitch. I don't know why. Periscope jumping in occasionally, but cannabis stuff is like shadow banned across many platforms. But we were just, we're looking at our subscribers versus on who watches us on Sunday. It's like, our ratio isn't too bad. Our ratio isn't too bad for no real promotion, and can't promote on Facebook, can't really promote. It's literally, we are like close friends hanging out and talking. So, word of mouth is definitely how I jump into chats during the week. Bingus is on whenever we meet, whenever the cannabis show or somebody, and I try to jump in when I'm home, or the progressive shows that I watch. I try to jump in and spread the word that way a little bit. But really appreciate you guys subscribing, ring the bell, share the channel. We do a show every week at 4:20 on Sunday, Reefer Revolution Live, where we spark up, talk about marijuana in the mainstream media, the politics of pot, and cannabis cures all across the country and the world. And then, of course, the Afterburn, where we check out the mainstream media news shows from all the different regions around the country and sometimes Canada, and see how marijuana is being covered in your neck of the woods. Marijuana, how they're marketing the marijuana. I like at least that these lawmakers are trying to take marijuana out of the titles of these things. But too boring for you on Twitch. Yeah, it's all very gamer oriented, but I'm trying to spread the message, spread the education, and who knows when YouTube's ever going to, might turn off the switch at any time. DLive, getting more and more viewers over there on DLive. So thank you guys for joining in. I try to get, and the DLive chat comes through on the Restream chat bot, which is kind of cool. And of course, we're over on Weed TV. I think we're still broadcasting over on Weed TV. I guess I should check. But I think we are still over on Weed TV, and we're now uploading to the Weed Tube. They don't do live, but we upload our videos over on the Weed Tube. If you don't know about those guys, it's basically a YouTube for cannabis enthusiasts that came out of YouTube shutting down. They did a big shutdown of cannabis channels last year, and the Weed Tube came out of it. So we started doing over there. They're working out some bugs over there, but you can check us out over there. I upload the videos afterwards. And just help us grow, guys, if you can. We do love doing this every week, and we've got so much stuff coming, and those videos. EdCan TV is sort of our sister station, other YouTube channel where we do put our straight educational stuff when we do symposiums. And I want to tell you, we are covering this week. There's an awesome expo here in Los Angeles Saturday, and we just got invited to come on and cover it as press. Machines, and I guess I shouldn't find the name. But literally, we just found out about it. Let me see where it is here. I'll find out what it is. I should know. Da 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 da. We're going to be in an interview. We might be covering the panels. We're still working out the details. I know it's just days away. Saturday. Machines. Anyway, I'll drop a note on Twitter. But anyway, subscribe. We'll probably go live Saturday just to check in from where we're at this conference, but then we'll be live again on Sunday at 4:20. So we'll see you then. I'm going to get going and find out what we're doing on Saturday because apparently it's coming up. So I better check it out. But things are going great. Lots of stuff happening up in Northern California. We're going to be going up there more often. What else can I tell you? Historical Senate hearing, first time ever. And breaking news, the MORE Act, another bill being introduced in the House by Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler and Senator Kamala Harris in the Senate. We have now the States More Safe Acts in the Senate for cannabis. So rename those the Trump Act, and we're done. We got it. We got this. Okay, guys.